Hey, it's Drybear. Many people have been asking which class should I play in Dune Awakening, and a lot of it is just born of not understanding how the class system works, or really just trying to find a class fantasy that fits for them in their role-playing experience, whether they're a huge Dune fan, a huge survival game fan, or anything in between. So today I want to walk through which class you should pick, how the class system works, and how to take advantage of that class system to best effect, so that you walk away from this video understanding what all the classes are good at and how to mix and match them effectively. So let's walk through the class system at first, because I think this is the most important thing to understand on how the class setup works in Dune Awakening. So the way this functions is there are 5 major classes in the game. There are 4 of them are your damage focused or combat focused classes. And these are the 4 you're going to choose from character select. So when you're making character, after you've customized the appearance and you've chosen your cast and your home world, you will then choose one of the 4 combat focused classes. And this is where people get confused. They're like, okay, is this a permanent choice? Am I going to be stuck with this? What should I pick? And that sort of thing. So the reality is you can gain access to all 5 classes in the game. They are accessed through trainers, NPCs that will teach you the class and unlock higher and higher skills from the class as well. And you will accumulate skill points that you can use in any of the class trees by leveling up your character. Now, it seems like we're going to get 200 skill points in total, which is not enough to actually get all abilities and all passes from all classes. They flip-flopped on this concept several times, saying that at one point that you could, if you played long enough, which could be a long time, you could eventually get all passives and all everything for your character. And then they've kind of flip-flopped on that and said, no, it's only going to be maybe just over half the total amount, but just know that you can mix together several classes together to make your own playstyle how you choose. And so there's a strategy of which class do you play the most of initially as you're leveling up, but also how do you supplement the playstyle of that using abilities and passives from other classes to make the class you're looking for. And I'll include this in the video because you probably will get yelled at quite a lot by people that have been playing the closed beta for a while, but some of these class trainers take a little bit longer to reach than others. The two class trainers that are the easiest to access are the Trooper, which has a trainer in the first tier 1 zone. Like as you start out, you can access the beginner Trooper trainer, and also the Planetologist, which is the 5th class and a non-combat class, is very easy to access early on as well. And so if you're being like a hyper purist, or you run into one of the closed beta players in the wild and they start screaming at you and shaking their finger, they will tell you to pick one of the other 3, Swordmaster, Bene Gesserit, or Mentat, because you could very easily get the Trooper trainer unlocked right away. And same thing for Planetologist. Though granted, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all that much. If you really want to start with Trooper, don't let the closed beta players tell you you can't do that. It just means that you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer before you can gain access to the Mentat trainer, the Bene Gesserit trainer, and the Swordmaster trainer. You can respec your class at any point as well, so if you start a certain way and you want to switch it up later on, you can, and you just are limited by the total amount of skill points you have available to spend in all of the trees. The next thing to understand is the slots that you have available, as well as the advanced skills at the top of the skill tree. So this is what you'll normally see. You can see the top left corner, there are 5 classes to choose from. Each one has their own skill tree that's comprised of 3 different sub-trees that have different passives, abilities, and techniques available to you. So looking at this, you can see that the triangular selections here on your skill tree are going to be abilities. These have cooldowns, active effects when you use them, and you can only have 3 equipped at any one time. So you look down here in the bottom middle, you can have 3 abilities equipped at one time. Again, there's no restriction on this. You could use 1 Swordmaster ability, 1 Trooper ability, and 1 Bene Gesserit ability. There's nothing stopping you from doing that if you wanted to mix and match to your heart's content. So you have that option for you as well. On the tree as well, there are circular nodes, and these are all passives. They give you a wide range of effects. They can make your damage better, they can make your healing better, they can make you use less fuel when you're driving a vehicle, and everything in between. So again, these will be probably the biggest consumption of your skill points, as you have to level these up multiple times, but that's going to be that. The last kind of node you have on these trees is going to be what they call techniques, but you can think of these as just passive effects. So they have this kind of, what is that, 8? So it's an octagon, this octagonal shape here. These will be passives that will have tons of different things as well. They can give you bonus damage. They can trigger when certain events happen. If you get downed, you can unlock these, or certain things can trigger to make these happen, but they're not active abilities that you use with a button press. You either will just have them on all the time as a passive, or they will trigger under certain conditions to give you some kind of benefit. So that is where you're going to be building your class. You can go through all the classes if you want, slot in 3 abilities that make sense for your build, and slot in passives or techniques that make sense for your build, collecting passives along the way. Then at the very top of the tree, this like mega square diamond rhombus business is going to be your advanced skills. And these, for the most part, require you to be spice infused, to become spice prescient, as they call it, which means you need to consume enough spice to trigger a special meter on your HUD and then activate that to get these up. So these are kind of like your ultimate ability in a lot of ways. Sometimes they're passives, sometimes they're techniques, sometimes they're abilities, but all of them are very impactful. You can generate tons of power for you and all your allies. You basically become a power generator that walks around. You can shoot hunter-seeker explosions. You can get crazy consumption for your battery pack. You can go into super modes, but you need to be able to have your spice prescient active for pretty much all of these in order to gain the benefit from them. So think of them kind of as your ultimate ability. So we have our abilities, we have our passive techniques, we have our passive stats here that just are stats in general, then we have our ultimates that we can use when we're spice infused. Now that we understand the whole system, let's go through each class individually, talk about what their strengths are, and also kind of highlight things that might be generally useful, because I think there's going to be some abilities like the Shagawire that will probably be useful for any build at any point. So even just having that class at the lowest level might be super useful. So we'll kind of highlight those. And then at the end, we'll talk about how they can synergize together and some suggestions there as well. Let's start with the handy dandy old trusty Trooper. This is the class that everyone tells you not to pick at first because it's so easily accessible. But what's great about the Trooper is I think they're just so good at what they do that I feel like a lot of people will probably find their home in being a Trooper main with, you know, other bonuses from other classes in that front. So Trooper is primarily a combat focused class, and what they excel at is twofold. One is going to be scatterguns, so shotguns, and also heavy weapons. They have a lot of specialties around scatterguns and heavy weapons, which includes flamethrowers, the Vulcan, things like that. So they get bonuses while wielding a heavy weapon, and they get bonuses for using a scattergun as well, which can be incredibly powerful at most stages of the game. They also have some cool passives around utilizing your suspensor belt. So they have, you know, they have a way to deal AoE damage from their suspensor belt to knock away melee combatants. They can, you know, have more power recharge, things like that. And they also play a lot around their kind of heavy weapons play style. So they can do things like increase body shot damage with their shotgun, which scales really high. They have some really cool bonuses to like body damage, move speed with heavy weapons. And they also have a really cool ability here in the middle, which allows them to, when they're hovering in the air from a suspensor belt, they can air dash. So they get some really cool combinations between that as well. Now, the first ability to highlight from the Trooper tree is going to be the Shigawire Claw. You actually start with this ability unlocked already if you choose the Trooper as your starter class. And what's great about this is it just is a grappling hook. You can grapple to an enemy, you can grapple to terrain, and what's even cooler about this, and hopefully they don't change this aspect of the Shigawire Claw, but it is a grappling hook that maintains momentum. So it's very possible, if you've ever seen someone just flying across the desert or way over a mountain, it means they're building up tons of momentum and then using the Shigawire Claw to launch themselves even further. And it makes traversal way easier because you can just grapple to a place, you can grapple forward, you can grapple up cliffs and things like that. This grappling hook is good for literally any build, any class, any character. This is one of the most universal abilities in the entire game. So even if you don't pick Trooper, you may want to consider getting at least the bottom right corner on the tactical tech tree for Trooper just for this single ability. Additionally, even if you're not selecting Trooper as the main foundation or structure for your build, you probably will want to dabble in the gunnery tree for them as well, because they have things like increasing your range damage as well. And especially if you're using a gun-based build, having increased disruptor damage is huge huge. Disruptors are specific weapons that you will use to penetrate through the Holtzman shields. Like when someone has a shield up, the disruptor is a perfect weapon. That how it'll work is you'll fire this submachine gun style weapon. If enough darts build up in their shield, it will disable it, and then usually troopers will just start firing at them directly, doing like body damage or something like that with a disruptor, because it is still an SMG, rather than switching to another weapon. You certainly can use the disruptor to break the shield, and switch over to your scattergun or your Vulcan or something and blast the enemy away, and then go back to disruptor if you need to. But having extra disruptor damage is useful. And you can also specialize in dealing body damage, which I would recommend doing if you're going for like a flamethrower or a scattergun build, just because you have more center of mass, which is the name of the technique, but you'll be able to like deal like all of your pellets from the scattergun, for example, to the chest, rather than trying to hit the head and missing some shots while getting a massive damage bonus to boot. An ultimate ability that I feel like is kind of slept on for just in the entire game in general is the energy capsule. This one you will be able to activate, which allows you to get a stim for 10 seconds. It will reduce, you will just increase your range damage by quite a lot, and you can combine it with another passive in this tree, Death from Above, which is while you're suspended in the air, any attacks using weapons will have a damage bonus. You can combine the like 30% scattergun damage with the 15% range damage, with the 30% body shot damage, with the extra stim damage on top of while suspended damage, and you can start one-shotting people with shotguns or with like the las gun, for example. The damage you get from this is actually ridiculous. You can also gain access to the Suspensor Blast ultimate. This is if you ever fight a heavy enemy, like in just a scavenger or a Sardaukar or something like that, they will use this quite a lot, and what they'll do is they'll like curl up into like the Dragon Ball Goku going SSJ3 like ball, and then they'll release a giant blast, which will slow enemies, drain some of their resources, and in some cases just completely disable them, which is really powerful. So heavies use this all the time, and you can too if you run Trooper. Now, the Trooper also has a whole bunch of grenade options, and there are some similarities between the grenades that Trooper has and the mines that Mentat has. Things like the anti-gravity field, which will lift people up off the ground and prevent them from being able to move around and things like that. The gravity field, which both the Mentat and the Trooper has, is actually super slept on as well. What this does is it creates a giant slowing area. So enemies or yourself, when you walk through this giant area, will be slowed for the period. However, what's great about these is it does drain power as well. Enemies caught inside of the area will have their power pack slowly drain, and the Holtzman shield, the damage shield, the blue overlay, requires power, which means if you face an enemy that has a shield on, rather than using disruptor or trying to poison them or something, you could trap them in a gravity field like this, which will drain all their power. When your power reaches 0, the Holtzman will turn off, and then you can just kill that enemy or that player if you need to. So this one is a super valuable option. Both the Mentat and the Trooper have options for this as well, so it could be one that fits into a lot of different builds. They also have some widely useful damage AoEs, arguably some of the most accessible AoE damage of any class in the entire game. So they have like the projectiles that they can shoot out, like little drones, and they also have the explosive grenade along with the collapse grenade as well. So you can use collapse grenade to suck a whole bunch of enemies in and then blast them with explosives on top of that. Super easy, high damage, very reliable. Now, I think good players and good positioning will be able to circumvent these in a lot of cases, or if you like really get into a good setup, you can play around them. But for general usage, they're incredibly powerful and very easy to utilize. A cheeky one is the attractor field. This means that you can put this on a target, and then shots that are near the zone that you attached will be redirected to that AoE. So you can, basically use a wall, like a cheat hack, to like aimbot on someone with this as well. In some cases, I don't think it's that hard. Like, people don't move fast enough for it to be too difficult. This may be more useful on console once we eventually have it, but it's something that could combo with other players in interesting ways as well. Now, when I play Trooper, I play it like a more traditional shooter game, like third-person over-the-shoulder shooter game. You can just pick up a whole bunch of heavy armor, carry it with you, and then use heavy weapons and like a scattergun to deal damage that way. And because they have the ability to dash in the air with a suspensor belt, they have the ability to deal direct damage or burst damage. They can control the field with tons of different grenades, and they also have bonuses to their range damage, bonuses to their body shot damage, and they can also use some of the fields they create to control space as well. And I have to imagine that a lot of people will be drawn to the Trooper just for its general playstyle and durability as well. And even if they don't, you probably will see a lot of people using some of the Trooper abilities in their build. The Shigarware Claw we talked about, but you could also do things like the Suspensor Belt Air Dash to get you some mobility, or maybe even some passives like range damage or scaling up that way. But I find that the Trooper is just so relatable in a normal sense because they don't really have to be as like recon or strategy focused as say the Mentat would be. They don't have to be as flexible or reactionary as the Bene Gesserit, and they also don't have to worry about space as much as the Swordmaster would as well. They can kind of just play a true shooter style gameplay and do excellently at it. And also wanted to highlight the gravity field countering shields like I do here. So you can see there's a heavy in front of me. I throw out the shield and I let it drain their power pack until eventually it blinks, power pack goes off, and then you can do some crazy damage to them up front. Super useful. The Mentat does this and the Trooper does it as well, which makes it very useful as a strategy. Next, let's talk about the Mentat, which is probably the state of closed beta and the beta weekend, the least popular class right now, because it's not, it's if Trooper is the straightforward, easily accessible character, Mentat is the complete opposite of that. Most of what Mentat does is strategic. They do a lot of information gathering, and they also can set up traps, ambushes, and like control space very well. However, a lot of their abilities do require a little bit of planning, a little bit of prep, and using the environment as Ra's al Ghul. You gotta be aware of your surroundings. That's where Mentat sits the most. So they do have some overlap with the Trooper in that they do have like fields that they can deploy and things like that. But they also do have a lot of really, really strong passives. So I think a lot of people, even if they don't mean to play as a Mentat primarily, will probably go into like the mental calculus side of the tree just to gain range damage, headshot damage, things like that. They work great with a ranged playstyle without necessarily playing off of the core kit and playstyle of the Mentat itself. So for example, you have range damage as a passive here, very easily accessible at the bottom of the tree, gives you bonus range damage, a very nice scaler for your damage output. Same thing goes for pistol damage, so if you don't want to use a marksman rifle and you want to use a pistol more often, you get some damage that stacks with that as well. It is ranged and pistol at the same time, so you can use both of these. You can get a technique that increases your headshot damage, and this scales up with 3 levels as well. They also have a fun technique that is really interesting. This is when you shoot an enemy, you can create a weak point on their body. So when you damage an unshielded enemy with a ranged weapon, so they don't have a shield up, you damage their health directly. Where you hit them creates a weak point as if you were shooting them in the head, which is really powerful. And you can just keep shooting that one weak point to get bonus damage. You can see the damage base is 50%. I feel like they're probably going to bring this down maybe to 40 or 30%, but 50% for 10 seconds if you hit a weak point on top of the extra damage you already have is incredibly powerful for any build that's running a ranged weapon. And you can also build for ranged rifle damage as well if you don't want to go for the pistol passive. You can even combine the exposed weakness with its counterpart shield overcharge. Remember, this has the activates when spice prescient modifier, which means that you have to be, high on spice to get this benefit, but it means that if you hit an enemy with a shield that has a shield active with a ranged attack, you will create a vulnerability that allow you to shoot through that shield without needing a disruptor or poison damage or drill shot or a slow blade. You can just keep shooting them with their shield on, which is super strong. Now in the assassination tree in the middle of the screen, they have some really great options for dealing poison damage. In fact, Mentat probably is the primary source of poison damage when it comes to just accessible abilities and passives and that sort of thing. Keep in mind that when you're talking about open combat, damage over time is pretty much always going to be weaker than direct damage in pretty much every case. So you're not really going to be poisoning enemies and then like watching them die in an instant. It is damage over time. The duration is quite long in many cases, and the poison damage can build up. However, as we mentioned earlier, you can deal damage to HP bars through shields using damage over time. So what you can do with a Mentat is play with a ranged weapon build, but also use these poison skills to apply poison early and often, make them stand in it, maybe with their abilities, that sort of thing, and then it will constantly chip down their HP, even if they have a shield up while you're dealing with that. This is super cool in like really close quarters combat, or if you're trying to do a wreckage where there's a lot of, corridors, tight corners, breaking line of sight. Chipping away with them with poisoning can be quite effective, but just know that you're not going to poison a target and they're going to all of a sudden die from hunger in place, because the damage isn't as comparable as the direct damage you would get otherwise. Now on this side of the tree, we also have even more headshot damage. So on the mental calculus, we have range damage, pistol damage, rifle damage, headshot damage, bonus damage if they're marked or you hit a target with a shield or not a shield. And then we have even more headshot damage on the right side here. So Mentat, I feel like, would be super fun to play with a ranged like sniper rifle or just a pure pistol build just to scale off of this, but they do have a lot of really good range options. And I do believe that Trooper and Mentat are a good like perfect pair. So going more into Trooper with Mentat passives or going more into Mentat with Trooper passives or mixing and matching them can make a big difference. And then for the ultimate on the assassination tree is the Hunter Seeker. This one is so iconic and it does a whopping, at least in the latest beta stage, 1200 damage. So you will lock yourself in place, go into the piloting the Hunter Seeker drone, and then you'll drive it into an enemy to deal damage. But it does a boatload of damage with a very long cooldown, but it's super cool to have this as an option. Then the Tactician tree has a lot of really fun things that you have to be creative to use properly, but once you kind of get in the sense of how they function, it can make a big difference on damage or on combat, especially against NPCs in the labs and dungeons. You can really play around with the AI in a lot of ways. The first ability is a shield wall. This is a half height, so it's like, you know, waist high wall that you create that is effectively cover. You can crouch behind it. You can treat it as cover. They can summon cover out of nowhere and stand behind it. They can create decoys that they can send out, which they'll just appear and start shooting, and then, you know, the enemy AI will start attacking it. You can fool players maybe if they're not paying attention, but it's very obvious it's a decoy if you're a player and you've seen it before. So it's not going to be probably too useful in PvP, but it is quite useful facing off against PvE enemies. And they also have probably one of the only ways to resist Bene Gesserit commands, so they can actually resist voices, which is also a very useful ability, and it's not too far into the tree as well. So if you end up facing a lot of Bene Gesserits in PvP, you may want to pick up Iron Will as an option. And probably one of my favorite ultimates in the game for group style content is the Source of Power. You basically will activate this, and then for the full duration, which is 20 seconds on the current build, it will generate power for you and for all nearby allies. This means that you can use suspensor belts and travel around. It means you can hold your Holtzman shield longer without having to worry about it as much. It means that the whole team around you gets stronger, gets faster, and more efficient just because of this, and it lasts a whopping 20 seconds. So if you're in the deep desert trying to claim some spice or a fresh wreckage that just landed down in the sand, having a Mentat on your team that does Source of Power when you need it is a game changer. And lastly, they have the 2 grenades that the Trooper has. They're just placeable mines instead of grenades in general. The Trooper can't actually like stop their grenades from activating, but the mines here for the Mentat, you can put them down and walk away. They won't trigger on their own. Enemies will have to either go into proximity of them, although unfortunately enemies, if they see the mine, they can shoot it to trigger it early, which can be kind of annoying. And because the Trooper can throw their deployables, it means it's safer to use from distance and from cover, whereas the Mentat has a harder time since all of their mines are placed directly at their feet. They can't even give it a little chuck, like a little distance. It's right at their feet. So if you're not careful, you can put these mines down right at your feet. An enemy can shoot it as you're putting it down and trigger it immediately. Means you suffer from the effects of it. But they have the gravity mine and the anti-gravity for both of the effects of lifting enemies up or draining their power and slowing them and slowing projectiles as well. So same effect, but you can use it a little bit more tactically, with the downside that you can't use it, you know, in a frontal confrontation from range. And the way I like to think of Mentat when I play kind of like a pure Mentat playstyle is I usually will go for either rifle or pistol and focus on headshots. Again, it's Dune Awakening. You want to carry a melee weapon with you or a disruptor with you, but you really kind of have to like learn the lay of the land and then use your tools of the trade. So there's the mine going down. I can place that down. You can activate it remotely. So that's the decoy. So if I aggro them, they'll see that as well, but it can be kind of janky depending on how things work. So there's the decoy. I can put down a slow flowing field. You can even put down turrets. And by the way, the turret placement, it doesn't scale as well until later stages of the game, but it is quite useful for the first. It's probably the most powerful ability in the first like zone, like tier 1, tier 2, because the turret just does ridiculous damage in general. So it allows you to play around that as well. And I do think that some people will really play around with the poison builds as well. You kind of have to do hit and run tactics with the poison because the damage isn't crazy high. But again, if you can get someone trapped in poison and start dealing damage directly to their health and then play safe, you step back, you put up a decoy, you put up a half wall, you try to hide behind that, or maybe you set up a bunch of mines behind you and then you retreat to them. So when enemies chase you through the mines, they end up getting obliterated from them and that sort of thing. So you really kind of have to use your head, play around your mechanics that you have them and understand how they are. But I think that when people really figure out how to play Mentat, it's going to be a very unique and fun playstyle, though I imagine a lot of people will end up playing Trooper with Mentat passives and skills to amplify just because they have so many goodies in their kit. Next up is the Bene Gesserit, and this one is probably the most popular class in the entire game for multiple reasons, partly the gameplay, but also because this is like the big bad, you know, Jedi-like kind of setup for the universe of Dune, right? So they have the ability to compel or command people to do things. And they also have, because of their supernatural powers, have the ability to enhance their physical prowess as well. So they have some really good useful like sprints. They can blink behind enemies. They have melee combos where they can like punch weak points and go martial artists on people, and some other cool things in between. Arguably the most general usage ability in the entire kit of the Bene Gesserit, similar to the Shigawire grapple claw for the Trooper, is going to be Bindu Sprint. When you activate this, you will pause, lock yourself in place for a brief second, and then just beeline forward. It gives you crazy sprint speed in the direction you're facing. You can use this to traverse sand if you need to, reposition in a fight if you're in a bad spot and someone just threw a grenade on top of you, and everything in between. So imagine, just like the Shigawire claw, the grappling hook, this will probably make its way into many builds, even if they don't put any other points into the Bene Gesserit tree, just because of how useful it is. Now, like you could kind of see with the Trooper and the Mentat, they do have a lot of overlap where Trooper and Mentat have tons of ranged damage passives and ways to scale up their range damage in different ways. You're going to find a similar connection between the Bene Gesserit and the Swordmaster. So there are a lot of melee damage bonuses and melee focuses. So I think that you can kind of loosely think of the Trooper and Mentat being closely aligned, and then the Bene Gesserit and the Swordmaster closely aligned. So you could probably end up making a very cool melee build by combining Bene Gesserit and the Swordmaster. So you can see, just like with the Trooper and the Mentat, we have blade damage as an easy scaling passive here. You can even scale up your short blade, which goes through shields. They even have a melee combo. So the Prana Bindu Strikes is this melee combo of like hitting weak points and dealing damage to people. And you can also stagger them from it as well. It's just a melee ranged combo ability that deals damage. And even cooler than that is the Weirding Step. So this is basically a shadow step. You're able to blink behind someone and then get in melee range instantaneously. It has a high stamina cost and a pretty sizable cooldown for, you know, limited combat skirmishes. But again, in some cases, if you see that an enemy is low on stamina or they're low on power and they're in a vulnerable spot, you can blink behind them and punish them in melee, which in many cases can end a duel or encounter in the blink of an eye. Swordmasters have an ability to parry ranged attacks when they enter a state, but they can't attack. However, the Bene Gesserit has a spice prescient ability, so when they're high on spice, after a successful parry, dart and blade attacks pass through them for a period, which means they can be completely impervious to attacks while still going after enemies during spice prescience, which is insanely strong. Next is the Compel and Ignore, so any of the voice abilities. Compel being probably the most useful. What this does, it forces your target to run to you, which means that when they get affected by this voice, you have to register them as a voice target, and the voice has to land, and if they don't have any counters to it, they will basically, their arms will go limp and they'll just walk towards you. Super strong for any kind of build, really. In fact, I can see some people wanting to use this in combat, but you land it on the target and they'll just walk towards you, and if you don't damage them, well, they'll just stand there and stare at you, which is hilarious. You can do a lot of really cool things with this ability, force enemies to reposition, split up encounters, or even grab like backline targets like Mentats or snipers and bring them to the front against their will. And you can fully invest in this voice setup. You can have like reduce cooldowns on voice attacks, faster registering on targets, and ability to use more of them at once. Honestly, I would kind of wait to see, at least in my opinion, I'm going to wait to see how good the voice builds are in like deep desert end game PvP, because it may just be super hard to pull this off. But if it ends up being very strong, I feel like pure voice, you may want at least one Bene Gesserit in your squad, just because they can create a lot of opportunities for other players at the same time. Now, the body control portion of the tree is actually widely useful. They have a whole bunch of healing, regen, and bonuses to health in this, which obviously can affect anybody. That can be just useful for everyone. At the bottom, you can increase the healing regen limit, so you can get over heals, which is really cool. You can further increase healing regen rate, as well as the limit of when the regen stops. You can even use sun tolerance to reduce the effect of sunstroke on your character. It means you can spend more time in the sun. This could still be useful in large scale encounters, because if it's all done outside, sunstroke is going to be a real thing. And kind of like the power generator ability of the Mentat, you can use an ultimate ability from the Bene Gesserit to reduce incoming damage and increase resistance to stagger for you and all allies in the area for a long 12 seconds. So if you pop this right as everyone goes in, it could make or break an encounter, especially in a group. Now, when you're playing Bene Gesserit, depending on what setup you go for, I would recommend playing a little bit more melee, as there are synergies with that as well. There's the compel. You can see that I compel the target and they just start walking towards me. If you deal enough damage to break the compel, they will wake up and start playing normally. But again, you can actually just make people walk towards you, which opens you up for perfect shots to the head if you're trying to do some sniper build, or setting up for melee combos as well. And don't sleep on the sprint either, because you could very easily use the sprint. Like right here, I needed to retreat because I was getting overwhelmed, or I was being overrushed in melee. You can literally just pop the sprint and clear an entire area in the blink of an eye and be somewhere else very easily. You can also rush up on people to get more value out of your melee as well. That sprint and reposition is incredibly powerful and very surprising. And again, here we go. We can compel. Very easy. He kind of runs towards me and I get to set up the perfect headshot if I'm using ranged on that front as well. Next is the Swordmaster, the last of the combat classes of the four that we've talked about here. And as you would expect from a class like this, they are very good at melee combat, and almost all of their abilities focus on either doing melee damage, setting up opportunity for melee damage, or being able to enable their melee attacks in some form, which includes a ton of really cool skills and passives that synergize very well with either the Swordmaster or a Swordmaster Bene Gesserit hybrid. Now, just like with the Bene Gesserit, we will be able to stack up blade and melee damage and slow blade damage, so you can already see crazy synergy between the two. Like, we could do all of the melee damage and slow blade damage passives in the Bene Gesserit tree and in the Swordmaster tree to skyrocket our melee damage to the moon. And you can even build up momental as well. One of my favorite techniques from the beta has been Dance of Blades, that when you kill an enemy, your next attack with a blade deals bonus damage and your sword will glow green. So you can actually go from encounter to encounter, getting momentum, dealing bonus damage that way. The Retaliate skill is super fun. The Bene Gesserit has one as well, as you can actually use both of those in combination. So when this one you just activate, and when you get attacked in melee, you automatically parry it and counterattack the target, dealing a very good amount of damage, but also applying a bleed as well, which, as we know, can go through the shields on top of it. So very easy to just pop this up and avoid damage this way, and works great with deflection. This is a state that you enter. You can attack when you're in this state, but you'll start flickering and glowing green, and any ranged attack that comes at you, you will automatically deflect and get away from you. So you can use this to, either you can run, you can use the claw from the trooper or the sprint from the Bene Gesserit, or you can use deflection to literally just walk across the battlefield, and if people are only shooting at you from range, you'll take no damage because you'll deflect everything. So that, plus the melee parry and the bonus damage, can create a lot of opportunities for you to move around the battlefield. A skill that I haven't really seen used ever, really, but is incredibly strong if used right, is similar to the Retaliate, but instead, when you parry the next melee attack, it will apply a damage done debuff to the target, which you can see is minus 50% damage dealt, which means that you can put this on a target, especially in group battles. You can debuff the target. If you cut all their outgoing damage in half, this is a crazy debuff if you can get it to go off. They also have one of the few sources of armor shred in the game called Precise Parry. Now, this is a spice prescient, so you have to be high on spice to get this to activate. But basically, when you have this passive active, like when you're spice prescient, which again lasts like 5 minutes, it's a very long period of time, your parries will shred damage mitigation from the enemy, which again can be useful for you. If you're solo, it can be useful for a group. So you can reduce the damage that enemies deal, and you can increase the damage they take simultaneously while running around the battlefield. It's super nuts. Swordmasters also have ways to avoid range damage, reduce damage they take, and they can also stack up damage mitigation as well. So after sprinting or doing a lunge attack, you can increase your damage mitigation. You can increase it through confidence, through the technique down below and the one to the side, and get very tanky while you're running around the field causing chaos. They even have a near death ability, passive technique, where when they get low on health, they will get crazy stamina cost reduction, increased health regeneration, and the poise damage taken as well. So they can go into like a berserk state when they get low on HP and just run around causing more chaos. They will start, if you choose Swordmaster at the beginning, with the knee charge ability. This thing is nuts. It does ridiculous amount of poise damage, a very respectable amount of regular damage, and in many cases, if enemies are low on stamina or they don't have a shield up, the knee charge can end a fight all in one swoop. It's super fun to use. You can auto lock on target with it as long as there's not any lag or desync causing problems, and it is an ability that you probably will see some other classes mixing in as well, because you can use it for traversal as well as in combat. You can also combine the Bene Gesserit passives for self-healing, max health, health regeneration, and like overhealing from health regen with some of the really cool healing passives from Swordmaster. I love field medicine. This gives you a bigger boost. Like every heal kit that you use, including the bandages, will have more overall heal and will give more up front as well, which is really strong. One of my favorite passives. It's super fun to play around with this one. You also have a very easily accessible ability stim here with a 14-second duration called Inspiration. When you activate this, you and your companions will gain increased blade damage, and this scales up as well. So not only can you do bonus damage on your next attack after defeating an enemy, bonus damage when you weaken an enemy, you can pick up the Bene Gesserit passives to do more damage to a staggered enemy, or more damage to a target that has their shield broken. You can combine that with Inspiration for even more blade damage, and you can do some crazy melee burst options, especially if you decide to use the Chris knife, which is a low durability knife that breaks on one use but does a bunch of damage. So you can kill an enemy with a regular knife, pull out your Chris knife, your bone knife, and then go in with Inspiration and your bonus is active to basically one-shot someone if they're not paying attention. It's pretty nuts. They also have what at first seems like not that great of a skill. It takes up a skill slot, it has a cooldown, a long cooldown, costs a good amount of stamina, so it doesn't seem like it's all that much, and the damage on it is very low. It's really quite weak, and that's Crippling Strike here. However, once you understand the combat system around being able to avoid being stunned or staggered, trying to deal with enemy shields and your own shield, you start to understand how powerful Crippling Strike can actually be. Because what it does is it increases the cost of dashing on the enemy, which is really, really good. They'll be slowed, and if they dash, it costs more stamina. Keep in mind that all of the staggering in the game, if you get hit by a slow blade, if someone staggers you with full poise break, you can dash out of any stagger as long as you have stamina. So you press left alt on PC, on keyboard, to dash out of the way. It costs a ton of stamina by default, but it's your way to avoid being stunned. So, and it's also the best way to deal with melee players, because you can dash out of their slow blade stuns and their staggers, which melee characters have a lot of. So Crippling Strike, if you do this as you go into a target you know is going to be dashing a lot, you can make their stamina go down even faster. Once their stamina is out, you can punish them really hard with some strong attacks. And if for some reason you didn't want to use the other prescient ability, you could go Prescient Strike. This just makes your next melee attack do double damage. It hits twice, which is super strong. It gives you the opportunity to do some really cool freaky deaky things, but I think it's also a little more niche in its use case. Now, one of the things I love about the Swordmaster in general is that they're kind of like a all-inclusive kit for the most part, right? Because melee weapons have a way to deal damage to HP, they have a way to deal with shields, they can parry if anyone gets in melee range, and they can deal with staggering, they can deal with damage mitigation. They kind of have it all. Their just biggest limitation is that, you know, they don't scale as well with ranged weapons. So while you do have to be a little bit clever on how you position and how you get into fights, it is kind of nice knowing that you can have one weapon out and do with basically almost any situation possible, because you can just parry and then slow blade, and then you can dash and dodge. You can also activate, you can see my dagger's glowing there because I have my next hit is big. If you get shot at, you can deflect abilities and shots that way. It just gives you a very all-inclusive kit. And again, once you combine Swordmaster with Bene Gesserit abilities where you can sprint across the field or shadow step, blink behind somebody, or do all that kind of stuff, it really creates a very flexible and wide-ranging skill set that is unique to the Swordmaster in general. Lastly is the Planetologist, and this is a non-combat class. You can use some of their abilities in combat and have great effect for them, but for the most part, they will give you a lot of valuable stats for like yield on your cut array, being able to store survey information you can sell to other players for maps when they reset. You can improve all of your vehicles, so like power consumption, reduce heat generation on vehicles, reduce fuel consumption, so you can use fuel easier, make it so you can repair your vehicles more effectively, exploration, all of that. So Planetologist, while not inherently a combat class, can give you a lot of really cool options for that as well. And I imagine a lot of people, once they've solidified their core build, will probably mix in Planetologist stats. So cut array yields, being able to farm more resources. You can increase the amount of dew and water you collect. You can also recharge your power pack faster and lower its consumption rate. Compaction is also a very useful passive because it increases the yield that you get from your compactor, which is your long staff-like tool that allows you to collect resources like spice. This one's going to be super useful for deep desert when you have to compact some spice fields very quickly and get more spice out of that. It means you're going to be a lot more useful in the deep desert. And they also have a lot of tools around using the power pack. So you can do like an ultimate here with reducing your power usage consumption. You can increase your maximum power regardless of what power pack you're using. And you can also do power regeneration faster as well, which not only allows you to traverse and use your suspensor belt more often or leave your Holtzman shield up for longer, but also has some synergy with Trooper as well. If you remember from Trooper, we talked about how if you're suspended in the air on Trooper, you deal more range damage. You can also do air dashes while you're suspended, things like that. So you can combine that with the Planetologist increased usage of power packs with that, and you can get some really cool combos out of that. Under the Explorer tree is the ability Suspensor Pad. You've probably seen this a good bit. This is basically a jump pad that shoots you up into the air. But as we mentioned with the Trooper, you can put this down on the ground, launch up into the air, and then use the Sugarwire Claw, the grappling hook, to go even further. So combining this can be super useful. Also, a little lesser known is that you can use this by placing it under enemies. If enemies walk into it, they'll go up into the air and be suspended as well. So there's a wide range of uses for this kind of ability. You probably will want to be aware of the Cartographer passive here in the Planetologist tree as well. This is how you create sync charts. So when you survey areas, either in Haga Basin or in the deep desert, you can then write down your map, be the explorer that you are, and then you can take that sync chart and you can sell it to other players on the marketplace, which means that when the weekly reset happens and all of the areas are reset, the sands have shifted and the worms have eaten rocks and stuff like that, you can then on reset day go use Cartographer to create a whole bunch of sync charts by scanning the areas and then sell them for large profits to other players who don't want to go out and rescan the areas after the reset. They can also improve their hand scanners, reduce their climbing cost of stamina. They can improve stillsuits to be better at maintaining hydration. And I imagine most competitive groups will probably want to have at least one Explorer Max Planetologist in their group because they'll be able to recognize the density of a spice bed from survey. So if you're in the deep desert and you're trying to find all the spice deposits, a Explorer explorer planetologist can determine the size and amount of spice that are in that area just from a survey, which is super and mega useful. Then the last tree, the mechanic tree, is all about vehicles. You can reduce heat generation on your vehicles to make sure they last longer. You can reduce fuel usage on ground vehicles, on ornithopters that fly by in the air. You can increase the efficacy of buggies and their attachments, including mining yields or scanning for resources. And I think all of those can be super useful. So for the people that don't like PvP as much, you may just want to be a planetologist that maintains the base, scans the areas, fills out the sync charts, maintains the vehicles, drives all the vehicles because you get so many bonuses, and is able to find secret locations that other people can rely on. So you can kind of be like the, you know, the ranger that goes out and maintains the land and the base and gets all the vital resources that your team needs without being like the PvP monster. Because I know there's definitely people that really enjoy the group PvP and single PvP. There's people out there that are, you know, they're PvE focused players, and Planetologist is probably going to fit right in that. So there is the full explanation of the class system, the theming and thematics for all of the classes in the game, what they're good at, and hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what you're going to build when you first start playing Dune Awakening and the combinations of classes you might put together. Let me know in the comments if you're planning to be a purist and focus only on one character, or if you're planning to be a combination hybrid of 2 different classes, maybe even 3 or 4, or just maybe focus on a specific style of gameplay. Hopefully this video was helpful for you in general. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.